Hello and welcome to the National Leadership Briefing. My name is Doug Sharp and I will be your host for today. Well, oftentimes we receive feedback from you, those we serve here on the National Leadership Briefing, and we have been hearing something back from you quite a bit lately, and that is you want to become more effective in using the tools that we provide you here on the briefing. Now, we definitely want to make sure that the tools are available for you to achieve the objectives that you want in growing your coalitions locally and effectively communicating things like the principles that undergird the four pillars right behind me here. But when you ask us for additional training when it comes to the use of tools, we are going to respond. So today is training day on the National Leadership Briefing. We have got an awful lot to cover today. We're going to go through all of the tools that we provide for you. Now, some of the ones you're going to be recognizing from perhaps things that you've seen before. So I don't want you to, if you hear something like we're going to go over the training tool of the Sphere Authority training template, for example, if you're familiar with that template and you've been using it before, I still encourage you to keep your eyes open and your ears open, because we are going to be providing you with this tool today, this actual briefing today dedicated to training so that you can pass it on to others. If you're watching this, for example, on social media and you're looking at the National Leadership Briefing for the first time, you're going to be seeing all of these different things that we use here on the briefing, and you're going to want to go to the website and follow up and download the actual tools themselves. And I'll give you all that information as well. However, if you are a returning person to the briefing, if you're a citizen who is registered for the National Leadership Briefing and you are going to receive the post-briefing notes today, I believe that you're going to be receiving a lot of fresh information here, maybe some tips as to how you can more effectively use the tools. Again, as you communicate the things that are important to you to others and grow those coalitions of support around you and your ideas locally, as well as continuing to grow the National Leadership Briefing across Canada so that our voice can grow. That is one of the strategies and the objectives here of the briefing, is that you and I come together and continue to invite others on the briefing so that as more of us speak to the issues that are important to us, we have a stronger voice, we have a louder voice, and we have more influence when it comes to things like legislation, for example, or communicating our views and values to our elected representatives. So let me just go over what it is that we're going to be covering here today on the training. We're going to be going through it at a pretty brisk pace. So please, again, if you're on the briefing for the first time, just do your best to keep up, and maybe go back to the website after and our YouTube channel. I'll give you all those details later, and just follow up and just kind of catch up on your own. If you're, again, registered today, you will get all of this in the post-briefing notes. All right, let's take a look at the agenda. First of all, the specific tools that we're going to be covering, obviously, is we're going to be seeing our intro videos, for example, like just the intro video that I'm going to play right after this introduction here. That intro video, we're going to talk about ways that you can use that. We're going to also talk about the four-pillar training tools that are available to you. We've got a video and a transcript. How do you use that? What's the best way to use that in your hands? We've got the You the Operator video. You are an operator. You are the person who is in charge. A lot of people might think that I'm sitting here and I'm the guy doing everything, but that's just not true at all. The reality is that you are the one that does the work. You are the one that grows the coalition. So we're going to understand where it is that you are positioned and how you can be most effective, than the things that you're going to want to focus on as you, the operator. So that's the you training video, for example. The next thing we're going to cover is the landscape training, which we call the Sphere Authority training template. Now, that is a tool that you can show people really what it is that we're faced with. How are we challenged these days? What are the things we're up against as individuals, families, the church, as we deal with civil government? What are those challenges? And that's with the landscape training. We're also going to do some horizon planning and preparation and take a second look at that horizon training video that's available on the website. We're also going to look at strategic resource partners, how to identify them and qualify them, as well as I'm going to bring an example of a subject matter expert. We're not going to have any guests on the program today. I should qualify that as well. There's not going to be any other voices. It's going to be me, but I am going to introduce you to the way that you qualify and basically evaluate whether a subject matter expert is someone that you want to use for or information as a source. That's real important, is that we qualify where we get our information on the things that we're going to be studying. Also, and then finally, we're also going to look for training opportunities. How to identify them. I'm going to be using an example of training opportunities that we deploy here on the briefing, and so that you'll have a good idea as to how to evaluate that, whether it's something you want to participate on, or whether it's something that you feel someone in your orbit or in your sphere of influence might be called to focus on, and how to identify those training opportunities and then share them with others. So as you can see, man, that's a whole mouthful, and you may not have followed everything right off the get-go, but it'll make sense as we roll along. So thank you so much for joining us today. Here is our first training tool that we're going to be deploying here today. This is our intro video here for the National Leadership Briefing. It's going to show the website address, as you can see, and this is a video that I'm going to put in the post-briefing notes. It also appears on our YouTube channel for those of you who aren't getting the post-briefing notes, but you're going to want to go to the YouTube channel. It's something that you can take the downloadable link or the shareable link. You can put it on your Facebook page. You can actually share it in your social media platforms and tell people about what it is that we're doing here on the National Leadership Briefing and inviting them to come along. So again, this video, even though it's something we use on the briefing all the time, it's something you see all the time, don't forget that it's also an independent standalone tool that you can copy and paste and use to share the briefing and an awareness of what we're all doing together here with others. So, hey, welcome aboard. Here it is. Here's the welcome video for today, another tool that you can use, and we'll be right back and get started with everything else. Thanks so much for your time today. I look forward to serving you on this immediate road ahead, and enjoy this tool, perhaps from a different perspective. Okay, so as you can see, this is a kind of a nice video. It's kind of energy, lots of energy to it. It's lots of flashing lights and things. It does give you some information. It doesn't give you a whole bunch of information about the National Leadership Briefing and what it's about, but it does give you the source of where people can register to be on the next National Leadership Briefing. So if you picked up that link from either our YouTube channel or the post-briefing notes that you'll get today, if you're registered for the briefing, then you'll be able to post that and start to engage people in a conversation about the National Leadership Briefing and where they can find more information. So that is an example of a tool. I think that a lot of us people just a lot of the people just kind of waltz by. They don't really recognize it as a tool, but it is something that you can open up a conversation with people about. Hey, have you ever thought about getting in a room with a group of people that are all working on the same thing, moving in the same direction, with the same focus, the same objectives, and all believing in the same things? Okay, so that's the tool of the intro video. Now, talking about believing in the same things and the advantage of us coming together, rallying around the same things, growing our coalition, not only locally, but nationally, we have the 4 pillars here behind me, and we have 4 pillar tools for you to use. So I'm going to show you a quick video here. It's only 55 seconds long, but it's just going to show you a short form of the articulation of the 4 pillars as a tool, and then I'm going to come back and talk about that right after this. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number 3, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number 4, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. That is good enough for us. That should be good enough for our elected representatives. Okay, as you can see, very succinct, very effective delivery of the message. These are the things that we believe in. That's how it starts. The four pillars, these four pillars behind. Now, we've encouraged you all the way along to really dive into these four pillars and really get good at delivering them as a message, being able to articulate them, having the information roll off your tongue, being able to say, we believe that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. We believe that that those we elect to service in civil government must oh my gosh, there you go. You see how important it is to actually be able to articulate them. I've said them 1,000 times. I'm tripping over my tongue here, but those that we elect to service in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. We also believe, as the third pillar, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizen, especially the vulnerable that live among us in our communities. And we also believe that it is inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. So that's what we encourage you to be able to do, is that if I shook you awake in the middle of the night and I said, tell me the four pillars, we want you to be able to get to that place where you can just roll them off your tongue. However, while you're getting better and while you're training, we want to provide you tools, things like this video. You can share this video with others. You can post it on your social media page. You can actually send it by email to people or put it into text chat boxes and invite people to join the National Leadership Briefing and also join whatever coalition you're building locally. And because these are the things that we rally around. So people, the idea, the intention is that as you present these principles of parental authority, right of belief, freedom of religion, protecting the vulnerable, and fiscal responsibility to others, they will see that you are one of them and that you guys have things in common. And that is what brings coalitions together, is where people share their ideas and people gather support around their ideas. So that's what these tools are intended to be for. That brief video is one of them. We also have a longer version of that same video that you can share that's 5 minutes long that tells the story of where the briefing comes from and where the four pillars come from. We also have a transcript that's available for download, again, that I'll include in the post-briefing notes and is available on our website. But this again tells the story, and this is actually in speaker note format. So you can take this and you can actually set it down on your pulpit if you want, and you can set it down on your desk and you can read it to somebody, or you can sit in a coffee shop and read it to a group of people. And it tells the story of where the four pillars came from, why we do what we do, why we come together, why there's an advantage there. And our objective is to advance these principles into society, culture, politics, and government. So those are the four pillar tools that are available. A short video that you just saw, a longer video that tells the story and includes that short video, and then also the transcript, which gives you in speaker note format the ability to tell the story without having to sort of memorize everything. You can just literally read it right off. And I've done that before. I've gotten up in groups of people and I actually just pull out the four pillar transcript and I just read it, because I want people to know that this is something that's totally duplicatable. That's what you want to be able to do, is get people to grow the confidence in themselves that they can then share the story and they can then add to their local sphere of influence and coalition of support around these ideas. So that is the four pillars. Those are the four pillars and those are the tools. Now, I know we're moving fast, but I want to cover them all today. And we've got the U training video. The U training video is just to bring to your understanding and solidify in you an understanding that you are the center of a sphere of influence. So some people don't like thinking about it in those terms, that they're actually a center of influence, but you are in the middle of a group of people all around you that only you can touch. And you have a responsibility within your sphere of influence to manage yourself. So the You Training video kind of talks about you and some of the authorities that you possess and some of the things. So here is a brief taste. We can't go over the whole video because we just don't have time today to do them all. But here's a brief taste of the You Training video that you can use, learn from yourself, but then share with others, again, to draw people into a conversation about working together with you. So here's the You Training video, a tool that is available for you to share and use on our website and on the YouTube channel. So let's take a look here at you right here. Now, first of all, it's important to know where we stand as individuals in society, and especially when we have the opportunities to influence public policy and influence the decisions of civil government. Now, you've heard me say this before, that civil government, which is established by processes that are political, has the power to make decisions that are going to impact the lives of our neighbor in either a positive or a negative way. Now, I'm going to say that again because it's important. Civil government, which is established by processes that are political, has the power to make decisions that are going to impact the lives of our neighbor in either a positive or a negative way. And that is another big reason about why we're here. We're here for the other. We're here for our neighbor. We're called to care about our neighbor. We can't just put our ears in our fingers in our ears and pretend it's not happening. We see it all the time. The decisions of civil government having a negative impact on the health and well-being of our neighbor. So if we citizens, you have an opportunity to actually influence those decisions and make the lives of our neighbor better, then we're all over that. And you know what? I'm not talking about dragging you away from where you are onto some other sphere, into some other sphere, or into some other place where you have no anointing or protection or authority. I'm talking about you staying exactly where you are, serving exactly the call that you know you're supposed to be serving, but using the authorities that you already possess and not taking a whole bunch of your time and having a massive amount of influence on these decisions of civil government that will impact the lives of our neighbor, like I say, in either a positive or a negative way. So let's take a look first then and remind you about some of the authorities that you already possess. You do not have to go out and acquire these or hone these. They're not like skills where you have to like work out and get really good at anything. It's you already possess them. First of all, the first authority that you already possess is you have authority as a citizen of the nation of Canada. Now, if you're wondering about what it is that your authorities are, then I am going to be sending you a link to a website that's going to give you, just kind of remind you about all the things that you can do as a citizen of Canada. Everything from getting a passport, serving in the military, voting at election time. I mean, all of these things are available to you. And because we possess this authority already, it's not appropriate for us when it comes time for us to exercise that authority that we actually just let that opportunity slide by, especially when we have such critical decisions being made right now by our governments. If we have an opportunity to put in place government leaders that are going to make better decisions, then we possess the authority to help decide who they are, then I think as citizens, we need to stand up and do that. Now, what is the second authority that we already possess? Well, we already possess something called constituent authority. Now, the reason I know that you have constituent authority is because if you're watching this video, there's a really good chance that you live in Canada. And just by virtue of the fact that you live in Canada somewhere, you have a postal code. Actually, and this is kind of the test to know if you have a constituent authority or not. If you have a postal code at the place that you reside, then that means that you live within something called an electoral district. Now, if you take a look at this map here of Canada over here, this map is actually divided up into all of the different electoral districts in Canada. There's 338 of them, and you live somewhere. You definitely live somewhere. And because you live within the boundaries of this electoral district, and we live in a country that has something that is representative government, it's a representative form of government, you have authority as a constituent to speak to your representative about the things that are important to you. Now, of course, here on the National Leadership Briefing, we're all really clear on the things that are important to us: parental authority, respect for and defense of our personal freedoms and our right of belief, the protection of the vulnerable, and our desire to not see our kids buried in debt. So those things we can, as constituents, with the authority we already possess, we can actually speak to our local representatives in government. Now, the good thing about the National Leadership Briefing and the fact that you're here is that we can do that all together. So as much as you might think that you don't have a lot of that constituent authority, well, you know what? You're tied in with a whole bunch of people from all across the nation, and together we use our combined influence when we speak to government leaders, so you can walk in there confidently and politely. Remember, we never ever have we never encourage anyone to bang their fist on the table. Just be real polite and just say, you know, this is something I got a concern about, and I'd like to share it with you. I'd just like to see you stand up for my right of belief and freedom of religion. And so that is something you can comfortably do, knowing that we're doing the same thing all across the nation. So that is your role and your authority as a constituent living within an electoral district somewhere here in Canada. So congratulations, you also got that authority. Now, kingdom authority, that is something, and you've heard me say this before if you've been on the briefing before, I don't comment on kingdom authority. Now, I could, if I was standing at a pulpit in a church, I would in a heartbeat. But what I always say is, I challenge the pastors on this one here, is that every person that's sitting in your pews, every person that you encounter, you know, within the faith community that you serve, you know that they possess something called kingdom authority. And you have a key opportunity to teach them about that authority and how they can wield it at election time, and how they can wield it within their community as they tackle the challenges that might exist within your local community. And you have a plan on how to teach that, and you have a plan on how to share that information. So I'm going to leave it to you to continue to do that. But remember, you have kingdom authority as well. Now, the last authority that I have here, it's actually kind of an interesting form of authority there. That PP there stands for political party authority. And what makes that authority so unique is that it's the only authority that's optional. You actually possess all those other authorities, but the last one is optional. You don't have it unless you decide you want it and you want to exercise this authority. Then what you do is you join a political party. Political party authority comes when you make the decision to pull $15 out of your pocket. I think that's kind of the average price of a political party membership. And you say to yourself, look, I want to purchase some extra authority so that I can advance the things that I believe in into society, culture, politics, and government. And if political parties are going to have conversations about the care of our neighbor, I'm going to pull my 15 bucks out, and I'm actually going to be at every table having every conversation I can. Now, there's lots of ways that you can do that without taking a whole bunch of your time, but that's what we teach you on the National Leadership Briefing. Let me give you an example. Right now, there are policy conventions that are being planned in all the political parties on the road ahead. You're going to see policy conventions coming up, and you can speak into that process very easily, but you need to possess a membership in the party that's having the policy convention. So for $15, if they all of a sudden want to have a conversation about expanding the eligibility of euthanasia to include children and the mentally ill, I'm going to spend the money. If they're going to be talking about how we care for our shut-in elderly or our drug-addicted people, folks in our communities, I am definitely going to be there for that. If all it costs me is 15 bucks to have a say, I'm definitely going to be there. Another thing that we get to do when we have political party authority that we purchase optionally is, very key thing is that we get to decide who the candidate is that's going to be in our local riding. So if we have one of these electoral districts here and we've got an election coming up, which we do, all of the parties right now are looking for candidates to run in the election. Well, if I'm a member of a political party, I can actually vote and say, I like this candidate over this candidate because this candidate shares my views and values, the 4 pillars, and this candidate is willing to advance them into the conversations that take place in the House of Commons. Another candidate might not be as excited about participating in that, so we have an opportunity to choose who best represents our views and values. Now, so those are the authorities that you possess and have the option to purchase more of, or additional authority that you can purchase when it comes to political party authority. Now, before I move off of your authorities, you might notice this arrow here pointing up above here, right? I want just to remind you is that as you wield all of these authorities, that it is for us as members of the faith communities of Canada, as we wield these authorities, we want to make sure that we are aligned with the will of God in our lives. We're members of the faith community. We're Christians, and we have specific beliefs about our Christian faith. And that arrow pointing up is to remind us that my goal is to align myself with the views that the Father has over our lives and in our lives and in our communities. So that's what we want to do, is we want to position ourselves in alignment with his views. And then as we use our authorities, we will not stray. Now, this arrow is also a good way to remember, too, the roles and responsibilities of church leadership and pastors. If we have pastors that are on, or leaders on, the National Leadership Briefing today, I got to tell you, I'm encouraging you, and I'm just asking you, please, if you ever thought that you did not have a role in assisting people in exercising the authorities that they possess to impact public policy and government in the country, I can tell you that we need you. You cannot, please don't think that you don't play a role, because as we as citizens take our authorities and try and align them with God's view, you're the ones that are going to be helping us to tack in the right direction and make sure that we remain positioned correctly by what you teach us ongoingly. So if all of a sudden they're going to have this conversation, like I say, about euthanasia or abortion or all of these really hot button issues, and we want to be aligned with the Father's heart and views on these issues, then you can help us by teaching on those subjects and on those issues, as to help us to understand God's view on this. So please, this is where you can help us, is to keep us aligned right there. So thanks so much for all you're doing there. And also, again, don't forget, Kingdom authority. If I've got some authority that, and you understand that authority and you can teach it to us, please do it. Do it every Sunday if you can, a little bit anyway. Okay, so you can see there with the U training video that that you've got not only you as is identified as the person, but also you being connected with an understanding of what your authorities are as you fulfill your responsibilities within your sphere of influence here in this world that we live in. But also, as you noticed, as you look down, you could see that there was a mention about how you can help from where you are in establishing things like citizen action group ministries, or where you saw CAG, or how you can help grow the National Leadership Briefing and our voice nationally. It goes into great detail about that as well. So those tools are available again for you, but also for you to share with others, because you do want to be as effective as possible in articulating what it is we do and how we do it and why we do it here on the National Leadership Briefing, and why you're active locally as well. It's important for people to know that you're a citizen that accepts their responsibility for just growing Canada, making it a better place, and actually keeping it free, remember, so that we can share the gospel. Ultimately, as we see government grow and expand and bloat and act in tyrannical ways, they're really at times working against our ability to be able to share the gospel, which is something that's very important to us, is to be able to speak freely, which brings us to the next tool that I want to review today, and that is an understanding of the landscape. We're going to do a landscape review with this tool, and that's the Sphere Authority Training video that we have to share, something that you can learn from about the challenges that we have as individuals, as families, and as the church when we're dealing with an ever expanding and tyrannically growing civil government in our nation. So let's touch on that now, because sometimes people need to see the challenge before they understand the need for them to respond. Sometimes they don't understand that there is even a threat on the horizon, and you're not out there to sow fear. As a matter of fact, that's a rule on the briefing here, is we never want to share something that's a challenge or something that is coming at us that's a threat unless we also deliver the corresponding solution. So that's what the Sphere Authority Training video does, is it places them, the person you're talking to, and you into a specific visual, and it then shows them what around them might be considered an opportunity or a threat. So let's have a look at just a brief snippet of this video here, because I want you to just get a taste of it, and then we'll come back in, I'll make a couple of comments, and we'll move on. Thanks so much for your time so far. I really appreciate you keeping up with this pace today because I do want to cover it all, but you'll also, again, get all of this information in the post-briefing notes. I am going to spoon feed it to you with links, really quick links that you can get in there and click on, and you can also go to the YouTube channel. So let's have a look at the video, Sphere Authority Training video. Okay, here we are in the boardroom, and as I promised, we are going to be showing you a practical illustration of why the four pillars are so key and how they can be utilized strategically when we all come together and support them and advance them using our combined influence. Okay, now this teaching template that I have behind me, this is something that is quite familiar to those who have been on the briefing before. But again, if you're new, we want to get you started right and tell you a little bit about this. We have this exact same copy of what you see behind me on the board on the National Leadership Briefing website, available for download. Now, for ease, I'm going to be including a link in the post-briefing notes today so that you're going to be able to download this easily and share this information with your friends. However, remember, you're also going to be getting the recorded segments of each of these training segments today in the briefing, so you could share that as well if you feel uncomfortable sharing this with other people. But I do want to use this teaching template to, again, demonstrate to you just how effective it is to use the four pillars to achieve our common goals. So here we go. This is the teaching template that speaks to the issue of authority and jurisdiction in our society today. If you look behind me here, you see four different categories which represent four different governments or spheres of authority that exist in society today. And these are actually biblically defined as well in the Bible. If you wanted to look for these in the Bible, you would also find them also there as well to just demonstrate what I'm speaking about when I talk about spheres of authority and influence within those spheres. Now let's take a look at them individually. We have self-government, that's you. You have, again, there are four governments or four spheres of authority, but there's you with self-government. This is your sphere of authority. Your jurisdictional limit of authority is identified by the outside line here, but everywhere within your life, you have authority to operate. You have the right to make decisions about your own life. You can decide what time you get up in the morning and what time you go to bed at night. And all of these decisions that you can make about what you have for dinner, lunch, breakfast, whatever it is, how often you exercise, how you treat your kids, everything is actually decided within this sphere of authority. And you have that authority, again, up to a very, very well-defined and appropriate limit. We also have family government in our society, where groups of people get together and you have a mother and a father and their kids, and they, together as a family, the parents make decisions within that sphere of authority up to the jurisdictional limit of that authority as to what school the kids go to and whether they go to church on Sunday and how they spend their time, their free time, whether they're on Netflix or whether they're having devotions. All of this is decided within the family. You have church government, of course, as well, which many of you are familiar with, and of course the all-important civil government. That is the other form of civil government. Now this isn't the limit of all of the governments in society. We also have the government of the marketplace, which we'll be talking about again on a future national leadership briefing. But for now, we'll use these four as an illustration. Civil government, of all of the four different forms of government, we always like to point out that they are unique among all of the other forms of government, because this is the only government in our society that has unique powers. And those powers are, first, to legislate. We grant civil government the power to legislate for the good of all of society. They are able to make laws. We also give them the right and empower them to tax. So these special powers to legislate and to tax are unique to civil government, and they can be applied and have influence and impact on all the other forms of government. Now, where does civil government get its power? I mean, it just doesn't just come out of thin air. No, in fact, what happens is that individuals in society get together in tribes and they gather around their ideas and hoist individuals on their shoulders and say, go represent us in government. And they have elections and they gather people together. And then as they choose their people during an electoral process, that's what this is. This is a conduit with which they transfer authority over to civil government so that civil government can act. Now, this transfer of authority is transferred in the form of what's called mandate. So we get together as citizens during an electoral process, and we gather our authority together as citizens, and we communicate or convey it to civil government so that they can execute a plan that we have approved of at election time. That is where civil government gets its authority. Now in Canada, the sphere of authority and the jurisdictional limit of that authority is defined by documents like our Constitution. Our Constitution clearly lays out the provincial government's authority, the federal government's authority, and we can refer to those foundational documents in our society. We also have something called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which actually is intended to protect the citizen from civil government, and we can reference that document to make sure that we are having civil government operate within its appropriate sphere of influence. Now, the only time that anyone would ever cross over and beyond their jurisdictional limit of their authority is with something we call here at the National Leadership Briefing permissions. That is right, permissions. So for example, if a family as a form of government granted permission to the church to speak into or have authority within their family, then they would grant the church permission to actually operate outside of its jurisdictional limit of its authority and have influence in the family. As an individual, we actually give up some of our authority to participate as individuals within a family. And of course, with civil government, though, because we grant them special permissions, or special authority, pardon me, we don't grant them special permissions. Because we grant them special authority, we are in fact granting them permissions to operate outside of their jurisdictional limit of authority so that they can actually influence and impact our lives in a positive way. But what happens if, and this is the key question, is what happens if civil government reaches out beyond its jurisdictional limit of its authority and gets engaged in the church sphere, the family sphere, and sphere of the individual? What if they do that without permissions and without a mandate? So in other words, they're not given a mandate to act in this way. They're not granted special permissions to act in this way, yet they use the power, the special powers that we grant them through an election in the form of a mandate. They use that power in a corrupt way, and they impose their authority on the church, on families, and on the individuals. What is that called? Well, that is called tyranny. So if a civil government is operating outside of a jurisdictional limit of its authority, and it is imposing itself on other spheres of authority, like other governments in society, like these ones that are illustrated here, then they're acting in what we call a tyrannical way. And that is a government that needs to be restrained and pushed back to operating again within its jurisdictional limit of authority. Now, I told you before we started here, I said I was going to demonstrate to you the practical, real, obvious example of why the four pillars are so key and why the people that are in the faith communities of Canada that responded to those surveys were so wise when they identified them as the priorities. Well, here it is right here. Imagine that you have a civil government that has become corrupted and is now operating outside of the limit of its jurisdiction and imposing its authority on the authority of all of these different spheres of other governments in society. What if society on the whole, individuals, families, and churches, what if they all got together and they stood behind things like, so let's use this as an example. We've seen this just recently in education. They stood behind a parent's right to raise their children the way they want. What if we all got together and used our combined influence as individual citizens and demanded that government operate within its own sphere of authority and put a pillar right there on the jurisdictional limit of civil government and said, that is the pillar to up and the point to up where you can operate as civil government. You can operate up to the point where you start imposing yourself and negatively impacting my ability to raise my children the way I want. That is now reinforcing the jurisdictional limit of civil government. What about the right of belief? What if the second pillar was placed right here between civil government and the individual, and everyone got together and said, you know what, civil government and civil government officials, I'm going to need you to respect and defend when necessary my right of belief and freedom of religion. That is something I'm going to need you to do. So I'm going to plant that pillar there, and me and all of my friends are going to use our combined influence to push you back and restrain you within that jurisdictional limit of your authority, the proper jurisdictional limit of your authority. Now, we could use an example in the church. Something that is very important to the church is how civil government and how society actually cares for the vulnerable among us. And we're called to care about the vulnerable. That's our responsibility. But sometimes civil government uses their legislative and taxation powers, and they actually can cause harm to people. Let's take a look at real life examples here. Euthanasia law that was just passed in Canada not long ago did not put in place adequate protections to protect vulnerable citizens that live among us in our communities. So people could actually be placed in harm's way by advancing euthanasia legally here in Canada, which has proven out to be the case as well. What about marijuana legislation that was brought forward not long ago, making edible marijuana products legal here in Canada? We're seeing more and more people present at emergency rooms here in Canada with overdose from cannabis overdoses at emergency rooms in both Alberta and Ontario, as an example, are 200% and 300% higher than they used to be before. So has civil government placed vulnerable people in harm's way by legislating things that are dangerous for them? Yes, in fact, they have. So we take the third pillar and we put it right there and say, you know what, we're going to require that every law and policy that you pass as civil government at the federal level is we're going to require that the first box you check is to make sure that you're providing for the safety and security of the citizens, with special attention being placed on protecting the vulnerable that live among us in our communities, like children who might have greater access to edible marijuana products, like perhaps you've got the drug addicted who are already having challenges. How are you going to protect them? What about people who choose to use THC products while they're driving? Do we have the proper law enforcement policy in place to protect citizens who might be in harm's way as a car goes down the highway being operated by somebody who's high on THC? So these are how you use the 4 pillars, is you place them on the limit, the jurisdictional limit of civil government, and you restrain them. You know, when we get into the videos like that, I always wish we had more time, because you know what? I have heard story after story from you about folks that have taken that information that's communicated in the Sphere Authority training video, and it's just opened up people's eyes. I mean, when you start showing people those jurisdictional limits of authority and the overreaching civil government, they kind of get it, right? And one of the ways actually that people have met with the most success in that area as well is not necessarily with the sharing of the video. It's that we also have, and I'm going to include this in the post-briefing notes, we also have a downloadable copy of this for you to use in yourself. You can actually walk people through the storyline of Sphere Authority training. You can do it off of this template. However, I want to remind you, as I flip over the other side, you really only need a blank sheet of paper, because you can draw 4 circles. You can sit down on the back of a napkin in a coffee shop, which I have heard has been very successfully used. You can sit down and you can write a circle and put self in there and talk to people and say, that's you. This is you in that circle. This is your sphere of authority. This is your jurisdictional limit of authority. And you can just draw it out for them. So these are the tools that we are going to be providing you, obviously ongoingly, but I'm going to deliver that to you as well, because that's an important part of understanding sphere authority. All right, let's move on to the next tool. It is something that we believe in here in the National Leadership Briefing, that if something is at your feet, and it's an opportunity or a threat, if it's right there in front of you, it's too late to fully capitalize on it if it's an opportunity, or defend against it if it's a threat. So we train ourselves to look out onto the horizon for those threats that are starting to well up, or the opportunities that are starting to come together, where we can exercise our influence or come together to greet that opportunity. Let's say it's a piece of legislation that's in the House of Commons, for example, right now. We don't, here on the National Leadership Briefing, you'll very rarely hear us chase a piece of legislation through the House of Commons. We're not going to be saying to you very often, okay, everybody hurry, you got to get on the phone and call your member of parliament, because if you're doing it, it's just we know there's people that do that, and we don't disrespect them. We don't want to disrespect them if that's part of their strategy. It's just that we believe that it's too late at that point, or that there's really a limited amount of influence that you can exercise. So we encourage, for example, if we get an opportunity to put a new lawmaker in the House of Commons that's going to be voting on a piece of legislation, we're going to try and put a good lawmaker in that place, because we know down the road they're going to be looking at reviewing legislation that we want to have them make wise decisions on. So we try not to get too reactionary and dealing with the things that are right at our feet, and we really try to look out on the horizon. Well, let's take a quick look at the Horizon training video, and just a piece of it. We can only do a piece of it because it is a few minutes longer than I can show you today, but it is something that you want to not only be thinking about yourself, but you also want to be sharing with others, so that they will want to get into your orbit, because one of the things that you're going to be able to do is promise to serve them by providing them with the horizon perspective. Let people know around you. Just say, hey, look, just so you know, if I see something on the horizon that I think is going to be a challenge for us or an opportunity we can capitalize on, do you mind if I get in touch with you? And oftentimes people go, yes. So that's when you can then bring things to people's attention. You can serve them where they're at, helping them to understand what's coming, and then they will want to join and support you in advancing, again, the principles that undergird these 4 pillars. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the Horizon training video. Well, this week we are going to dial our focus into a very, very specific part of what you and I do together, and that is the developing of what we call your sphere of influence. That is you locally looking for people around you that share your views and values, that you can work with and stay in relationship with and serve when we have an opportunity to speak with a unified voice on the things that are important to us. And of course, we always want to advance the 4 pillars and the principles of the 4 pillars into society, culture, politics, and government. So whenever we see an opportunity to do that, we want to capitalize on it. Or whenever we see a threat to one of those principles, we want to prepare a defense against that. But you building your local sphere of influence is really important. You finding those alliances in your own community and in your own orbit of the people that share your views and values is a big part of our success. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything to help you if you have retention problems. And that's what we've been hearing from some of you, is that some people are telling us that they talk to people, they talk to neighbors, other people in the church, and they might say, hey, we've got this group gets coming together and we stand for parental authority and the right of belief and freedom of religion, and we want to protect the vulnerable. And of course, we're really, really conscious of the amount of debt that's being piled on the backs of our children and future generations. And you invite people to let you serve them, to keep them apprised of where they might have an opportunity to advance these things themselves as well. So that if we hear that you're having challenges growing your sphere of influence and growing your reach locally, we want to help. And we think we have a tip for you here today that's really going to help. Now, one thing that we found on the National Leadership Briefing is that things are moving awful fast all the time. We get together on the first Friday of every month. We always only meet for 1 hour, and then we have these midweek touch points during the week, throughout the week between the briefings. That's not a lot of time to get together. So we want to make sure we use the time to the best advantage. And sometimes we have to move fairly quickly. So when you introduce somebody brand new to the National Leadership Briefing and introduce them to the idea of coming together on a regular basis and rallying around these principles, then they are joining something or coming on board something that is moving quite quickly. So we've got to my first suggestion is to slow it down a bit when you introduce it to them and bring it to them in increments. Like introduce the idea first of the 4 pillars, for example. Start with the story. Tell them a little bit about the 4 pillars and what they're all about. Tell them there's a group that gets together on a monthly basis, and ask them if they'd like to join the next call. Now, when you get them on the next call, let them know before they come on the National Leadership Briefing, let them know that things move fast and that you don't want that to in any way scare them or startle them, but things move fast because there's an awful lot going on. But the third thing I want to point out to you, which is a really, really important tip, is this arch that's over my head that says Horizon right behind me, right? So here in the National Leadership Briefing, no matter what point it is that you join the briefing, that becomes your now, your present circumstance. That is when you are seeing the National Leadership Briefing for the first time. Well, what I'm going to suggest you do is when you do that is make sure you point out to the people that even though you're starting right now, we want you to think that off into the future, there's going to be an opportunity that we can capitalize on together to speak with a unified voice, or there might be something that is threatening to the things that we believe in, like parental authority, or maybe there's more debt being piled on the backs of our children. But we want you to immediately tell people that no matter when they come on the National Leadership Briefing, that we are scanning the horizon always, looking for those opportunities and threats. And then what we're doing is we're using the road ahead of us to prepare ourselves to capitalize on that opportunity or defend against that threat. So as you can see, there is an opportunity there to serve those people that are around you in your sphere of influence, which really is the best way to draw people to you, is with that offer of service. What's coming down the pipe that's either a good thing or a bad thing? People love to know that. And if you stick around on the National Leadership Briefing, I provide you here on the briefing with that horizon perspective. But I'm also all the time hoping that you too get used to scanning the horizon yourself locally. Maybe you've got a school board trustee election coming up and you have an opportunity to support a candidate or run a candidate or be a candidate. You could do that. Or maybe you've got a municipal government election coming up. You've got an opportunity to perhaps establish a CAG ministry at your church. Whatever it is, whatever your actual opportunity is, you want to be able to see it first on the horizon. So it's a training tool that is very valuable and people do appreciate it. I'm telling you, it opens up a lot of doors for us. All right, let's keep moving forward. Let's talk about our strategic resource partners. Now, you've heard us talk about these before. We sometimes use the term KITE. These are KITE resources. These are Kingdom Influence Training and Education Materials. That's what it stands for, KITE, Kingdom Influence Training and Education Materials. We want to advance the kingdom of God here on earth, so we want to make sure that we've got the appropriate resources in our hands to do that when we need them. So we have strategic resource partners. We have on the National Leadership Briefing vetted people. We've brought them on the briefing. We bring these subject matter experts on the briefing, and we want you to better understand different issues. Now, let me give you an example. This is a subject matter expert. Her name is Cathy Peters. She is the premier. In my mind, she is the premier educator, human trafficking, sex trafficking educator. She trains police forces and municipalities and all kinds of leaders on how to best and effectively deal with the issue of human trafficking. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Doug, I don't actually have that on my heart. I don't believe that that's what God's called me to do. I don't think I'm supposed to be out there fighting against, for better laws in that area. But this is the thing, is that we want you to understand that there is an inventory, a subject matter expert inventory, a strategic resource partner inventory that we keep here on the National Leadership Briefing for those people in your orbit that might come forward and say, hey, I've got a heart for protecting the vulnerable in this area. Do you know where I can find some resources? This gives you an opportunity to take some of these resources and serve the people locally with them. So that's why we have these relationships. Now, what I'd like to let you know also about is, so just give you another example, is this is an organization called Right Now's EDA Guide. Now, electoral district associations, these are the boards that sit monthly or every other month locally with their members of parliament and with the members of the legislative assemblies, and they're designed to be a support for the political structure or the re-election or election of these candidates to parliament. And we encourage everyone to identify in their orbit somebody who feels called to sit on these boards. Well, this EDA guide that's produced by Right Now, if we don't tell you about it, if we don't vet it, if we don't put it on a list somewhere and have it available to you, you might be going, well, hey, I've got people coming up to me and going, they want to be on the board of the local electoral district association, and how can I find the resources? So we maintain these relationships for you and make these available to you. So this is a tool that you're going to get on the National Leadership Briefing. Now you can see how you can build up quite an inventory. We've been on the briefing now for over 4 years, and we've built up quite an inventory. So when we get a call from somebody who sparks on the briefing and says, you know what, Doug, I understand God's calling me to do this. I prayed like you suggested I did. I prayed to God. He let me know he wants me to be activated in this area. Do you have any tools available? We've got an inventory of tools for you. So that is something that we maintain here on the briefing. So that is an example of something that you can talk about with other people that will draw them to want to be in relationship with you because you are a valued source of information. It's not all about us. You're on the briefing too. You can communicate this information as well. So anyway, I'm going to put those 2 tools in the post-briefing notes today so you have it available to you. Let's now move to the next opportunity that we have for training, and that is special events. All right. Special events occur. There are things that come up that we want to, here on the National Leadership Briefing, make available to you. High-level training. Remember, we're vetting everything that we touch and share with you here on the briefing to make sure that it is a high standard, effective tool that can be used and is manageable in your hands and in the hands of the people you serve. So we are going to show you an example now of an event that we actually support and participate in forming. I'm actually, I work with the people who are put these things together as one of the members of the advisory team, because we want to make sure these are available for you. So let's have a look at this video, and I'll come back real quick and share a little bit about it.
We're crying out for the church to be the church in the community.
The ecclesia is a relational model that God has been calling forward.
Being present is about showing up on a regular basis.
So I'm convinced that God will birth a love in one's heart for the place He has put you in. And sometimes that requires a process. Sometimes we don't initially love the place where we are or where God is sending us, but we respond in obedience.
And I believe there must be the restoration of the cry of God in the heart of us as leaders to cry out to God for our cities.
And for those of you who have a heart for your local community, then I would encourage you to participate in what we call transformer calls, focused on your engagement and the love that you have for your communities. Okay, so community action councils, and actually I have to tell you something great news that's coming up. There's been some adjustments to the actual communications approach for those community action councils. So you're going to be seeing it more move into a community transformation language model in the future. However, As things change, we're going to actually be bringing you the latest updates all the time. So you will have the very best of the best, latest information to share. Now, let's take a look at the video though. That's a video. That's a tool. That is something that you can, we'll always let you know when an event is coming up. It's a community transformation event. It's where we bring on high level, very extremely competent, high level quality speakers with great information for those among us who have a heart for their community. You heard us say that there on the video. It is for those within your orbit that might believe that community transformation is something that God's called them to engage in. Maybe you've got someone in your church family that wants to reach out to the marketplace leaders and get together with community government leaders at municipal level, and you might want to all come together and start tackling some of the challenges. Or maybe you just want to be there and walk alongside people in your community with challenges and help them. Whatever it is, we want to make sure you're aware that there are tools that are available, like special events, the Community Action Council or Community Transformation webinars that we host every other month. So keep your eyes open for those tools. Now, as the events come up, we're going to give you a video that you can then share with others to draw them to participate and engage in that process. That's what tools are for. Remember something about tools all the time is that they are designed for very unique purposes. Tools, by their nature, are designed to do certain and specific things. Also, the effectiveness of a tool is limited by the operator's ability to use it. So that's why you and I have been talking all day today about the use of these tools and getting better and better at using it. But you got to get out there and try. You got to get out there and make a few mistakes. And please don't wait until it's perfect before you start drawing circles on the back of a napkin and sharing the sphere authority realities with people. If that is what you feel called to do, don't be afraid to go out there and make mistakes, make a mess. We'll clean it up later, but get out there and tell people that there's a group of people here in Canada that believe that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. There is a whole bunch of us from C to C to C that believe that those we elect to serve in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. We also believe that protecting the vulnerable is a priority of civil government, and the burden of debt must be lifted off of the backs of our children and future generations. And then when you share that with other people and say, you're not alone if you're concerned about these things, but there's a group of people across this nation that are doing something about it, and we meet once a month on the first Friday of every month for only 1 hour. It's only 1 hour, and we develop strategies and look for ways that we can advance the principles that undergird these things into the conversations that take place in society, culture, politics, and government. Would you like to come along? Would you like to add your voice to ours? Would you like to come along and see what we could accomplish together? Because you know, one thing I do know for sure, we're way stronger together. If we come together, there's not a lot that can stop us out there. So I hope that was helpful for you today. Thank you so much for getting back to us with the feedback that you wanted, additional training when it comes to tools. Thank you so much for being on the briefing, and thank you so much for adding your voice to ours and caring about your neighbor and your nation. Well, we'll leave it there for today. We'll talk again next month. Look forward to seeing you then. Until then, though, please know that I will continue to pray for you, your family, and will continue to pray for this great nation of Canada. Bye for now.
It's time to wake up from our slumber
and stand together, united as one. One family, one body, one church.
We will not walk past the vulnerable.
Say nothing, do nothing, and turn a blind eye.
We are citizens of a great nation.
We are good Samaritans to our neighbors. You are not alone.
We are the largest unified voice in Canada. So we stand united. This is our rally cry. We are Christ to our nation. This is our battle cry. He shall have dominion from sea to sea and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Righteousness will reign. Justice will prevail. We